Welcome to the Money Insights Podcast, where high-income earners come to learn wealth-building strategies that will take them from high income to high net worth. With your hosts, financial and wealth-building experts, Christian Allen and Rod Zabriskie.
Welcome into today's episode of the Money Insights Podcast. I'm Christian Allen, here with my co-host, Rodney the Pod Zabriskie. Rod, what's up, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
Never better.
Nice. That's what I like to hear.
That's how good I am. I'm extra good today, Rod, because we're taking the clock back, setting the clock back. What do you say? What are we doing? We're
setting the clock back. Sounds good.
Setting the clock back. Okay, we're setting the clock back, and we're going to do some good old-fashioned myth busting.
I like it.
So I checked into this to make sure we haven't done too much myth busting, and we haven't myth busted since episode 58. Well, episode 58 and 60. So it's been about 150 episodes back. So I thought, you know what? It's time to do some serious myth busting again.
Okay,
so
sweet.
I'm calling today's episode Myth Busting 2.0 because last time when we did it, we got into a bunch of we were doing Dave Ramsey myth busting.
Yes.
So today, I guess we're going to be doing ChatGPT myth busting. Kind of. It's like a hybrid list between me and Jarvis, aka ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So anyway, it'll be interesting. So I think what we're going to do though here is I have a list of like 21. I probably could have come up with more, but I have a list of 21. I thought that was probably more than enough.
Sure.
And I don't know that we even need to get into all of these, but there's 2 points here. Number one, we've got to decide if it's actually a myth, right?
Okay.
Because let's not pretend ChatGPT knows everything. Pretty smart, but you know. So let's decide if it's actually a myth. And then if it is a myth, we'll do some serious busting, but we don't have to get to all of them. So as we're going through this, Rod, you have a job. I need you to do this job well, because otherwise this could go poorly.
All right, I'll see what I can do.
I need you to make sure that as we choose a myth, we take it off the board so I don't go back to the same myth.
Okay.
Can we do that?
Yep.
Okay. So if I say the same myth more than once, whose fault is it going to be, Rod?
I'm gonna nail you to the wall if it happens.
Okay, sounds good. So I think we're on the same page. Okay, myth busting 2.0. The Dave Ramsey one was fun. A lot of them were really simple. A lot of them, weren't getting into like the alternative space and things like that. And so
Sure.
in today's myth busting, we're going to go a little deeper. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm expecting you to come out with some killer insights, Rod. So the question is, where do you want to start? And I'm going to let you've got 21 myths or potential myths in front of you. Where do you want to start, Rod?
Well, how about we start at the very beginning?
I'm not even going to say anything with that. If you want to start at the beginning, Rod, then that's fine. But I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of finishing that line.
Okay, so, but it makes it easy for me to do my job if
that does
at least
easy.
this
but, okay,
one. I have a feeling
that one will be easy, but I'm not going to go in order. You just have to know that. Okay, but let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
What's myth number one?
Yeah, so the first one we have here is high risk equals high reward.
Okay, well, where do you think? Well, I mean, what's the starting point is that a common myth?
It's definitely a myth stated that way. High risk equals high reward. Well, high risk implies that there's a significant chance that you don't succeed. So high risk can, in a lot of cases,
the statement in and of itself,
high reward. Now, if the implication is, you have the prototypical graph where you see low risk is typically going to result in low opportunity for reward. Higher risk gives you higher opportunity for reward. And generally, I would say that that's true. But there are obviously a lot of different ways that you can invest, and taking on, it isn't required to take on more risk in order to increase your reward.
Okay, I agree with that. I think it is a myth. You're absolutely right. High risk does not definitively equal high reward.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even conceptually always equal high reward. It just means that there exists a possibility, right?
Yep.
That's just typically what we see. The correlation is that when we're willing to take on more risk, we have the opportunity to get more reward.
Yeah, and the challenge...
It's not definitive.
Right, and the challenge that we see on this one is people who maybe get started late and feel like, oh man, if I'm going to hit my goals, I have to take on higher risk in order to even have a chance at getting there. Well, number one, I would say that's not necessarily true. There are ways without you don't have to increase the same amount of risk in order to get the same amount of increase in potential reward. Right.
Okay. Give me some example. Like, do you have an example?
Well, so the biggest one that comes to mind, two examples that come to mind are leverage, conservative leverage. Again, if you're going to the extreme, then yes, you are taking a lot more risk on. But if you're using conservative leverage, you can add a little bit of risk, but the reward that can result from that can be multiples, right? You've amplified your opportunity for reward by using leverage, and you don't necessarily have to take on an undue amount of extra risk in using leverage.
So, and here's the other thing. Another way to state it is utilizing leverage doesn't definitively mean that you're taking on more risk than if you didn't have leverage. So as an example, maybe an oil and gas investment, there's not necessarily leverage connected to that, right? It's you're purchasing whatever you're purchasing and you're hoping to hit. In a situation like that, like, you might end up doing even better than a real estate deal that let's say it's a more simple, basic real estate deal where I put 25% down and leverage the other 75% from a bank loan. Yeah. And in that situation, I'm still taking on more risk in the oil and gas deal than I am, even though I've taken on leverage on the other one. So
yeah, and I would maybe go at it from a little bit of a different angle. Let's say it's the real estate investment, and you are uber conservative, and so you just say, well, I'm just going to buy it in cash and create some sort of reward. Well, if you said, okay, well, I am conservative, but so instead of going 25% down and finance the other 75, what if I go 50% down and finance the other 50? I've added leverage, and maybe I've added a little bit more risk, but in reality, like, regardless of what happens with values or even interest rates or things like that, chances are I haven't increased my risk much, but I've definitely improved my reward.
Not only that, but risk can be, well, you can de-risk in multiple different ways. Leverage isn't the only way to do that, right? So as an example, if instead of taking on, if I want to go more conservative, that could just mean that I make sure that I carry more in reserves, right? Sure. That's another way to reduce the risk of my overall investment. So like you said, I could go, instead of going 80-20, I could go to 50-50 or whatever. I could still go 80-20 and carry an extra 6 months reserves and again, I've de-risked the situation like pretty tremendously just by doing that simply. Okay. Yeah. So I think that's good. So I think that's a fair one. Take it off the board, Rod. High risk does not definitively equal high reward. Okay, I'm going to jump us down a little bit. I'm just going to throw a dart at the board. Unfortunately, that doesn't really work since it's just a list. Okay, Rod, number 6. Okay, I want to go with number 6 because this is something that we hear. And can I also just tell you, like, maybe there's a little bit more of this feeling today than there was 5 years ago.
I would say that's true.
Myth number 6. Alternative investments are too risky. Okay, so first of all, let's get some context out here. Alternative investments just means investments that aren't stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Basically, anything else fits into the alternative space. Okay, so now that's the case. I think by saying it's too risky means that, like, oh, I shouldn't invest in those, aka it's too risky to actually do. So, yeah. But I think really the question, maybe the better myth should be alternative investments are more risky than traditional investments. Because to me, that's a more relevant question. Like, obviously, we can bust this and say, no, they're not too risky. It would be ridiculous to say that that
In all
any
cases,
alternative investment, I'm out. I'm out.
Yeah.
So we're going to change this a little bit, and we're going to say alternative investments are more risky than traditional investments, but I would still call that a myth. But it is one that I think is absolutely a common myth out there, something that generally people believe. The general population is taught to understand that mutual funds, ETFs, like that's the way that's just the way that Americans do it. That's the way, that's like the surefire way to success, right? We hear it everywhere. It's on the TV. Like, I will say this, ever since like the digital age has changed, like I think real estate has created, like has gotten a little more traction. But if you were still taking it from a percentage basis, it's like 90-10, like most of it's headed that way.
Even in the terminology, when you say invest, most people, that's all they think about. That's the only thing that's on their radar is traditional stocks, bonds, mutual funds. They just don't even think about anything else.
I totally agree. Okay. So then the question is, Rod, what do you think when I say that they're not too risky, but more risky? Are let me try this again. Are alternative investments more risky than traditional investments?
So I would say it's a myth as well, because, well, think about, so just even take stocks. When you say what's the risk of investing in stocks, I can't answer that question. What stocks are you talking about, right?
Penny stocks, everyone, of course, Rod.
Yeah, so
the low risk stuff.
If it's investing, if you're saying, when you say invest in stocks and you're only ever talking about blue chip companies been around a long, long time, pay dividends, like all this stuff, then I would say, okay, yeah, that's pretty stable as a whole, right? As a category. But again, stocks is a broad category. It's not only blue chips, it's everything. Okay, so now over on the alternative side, are there alternative investments that are as safe or on the same kind of risk level as blue chip stocks? Absolutely. And are there alternative investments that are much more risky? Yes. So
okay. I agree with you, but I have a question that I'd like you to answer. My question is this: why do people in general, and think about this like not just the superficial way, but like, why do people believe this is the case? Why do we believe that alternatives are just like more risky, like they're less? Why is it?
So here's my theory: is it's familiarity. Because, well, we deal with it every day when we're teaching people our strategies. So take the capital avalanche as an example, because that would be, people who are preparing for retirement. Do you put it into the 401k or do you put it into the capital avalanche? These are the kinds of things people are thinking about as we're having these conversations. Well, I can guarantee you this: in almost every case, they scrutinized capital avalanche much, much more than they ever scrutinized the idea of putting money in their 401k. And I think it goes back to familiarity. That my parents did, my neighbors do, my coworkers do, my HR director says I should. So, and when I do, like I say, okay, yeah, great, I'm going to participate in the 401k and put my money in there. And then they say, okay, great, now you have to choose what it's going to be invested in. And I wasn't even thinking about that when I made the decision to do it there, right? And then when I say, okay, well, great, I don't know how to evaluate these options, so I'll just pick whatever jumps out at me. Well, that's kind of scary when you think about it. And yet it happens every day. For most Americans, that's the way it goes for them.
Right. I think it's even deeper than just familiarity. Okay. I think that it's marred in truth. And that is the reason that that's what makes a good myth. Okay. There is some truth to this. Like, let's be real, right? Okay, so I'll give you an example. Is someone more likely to lose money by deferring money into their 401k, or significant amount? Let's say lose 50%.
Okay.
By deferring money into their 401k that then goes into some sort of ETFs, which are, in some sort of, asset allocated between, different
60, 40, yeah, whatever.
60, 40, whatever, right? Or is someone more likely to lose a significant amount of money by taking their money and then going out and doing a personalized singular real estate deal? Now, you might say, oh, well, if you really know what you're doing in the real estate space, that's not an issue. But let's just say you equally don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. Then, yeah, I can see what you're saying. Alternative.
So, I guess my point is that there is more effort. So it's familiarity, but there's also some truth to it because people hear about the experiences of other people who go out there that don't know what they're doing yet, who haven't maybe taken those initial steps that are critical to the alternative space, which is educated. We always tell people there is more of a due diligence process that I think has to happen inside the alternative space. And I think it's because of this. I think that there is an element of there is a different level of risk. And maybe it's because partially due to familiarity, but it's also just due to people's experiences, what they're actually seeing, hearing, and experiencing themselves.
Yeah. So my recommendation is no matter where you're investing, learn about what you're investing in. If it's worth you putting the money into it, it's worth you putting even a little bit of time into understanding it, at least knowing what you're doing. Okay. But I agree with you.
Good advice.
Someone who's going to shift into the alternative space, it is going to take a little more, a lot more of a learning curve to get there, because it is easy to just drop it in the 401k. Someone has pre-selected a short list of options to put the money into, and they're not generally putting into those options anything that's very high risk, right?
I don't know if it's herd mentality or laziness or what, but I think people just realize that people are more likely to invest and do it if they just make it turnkey, easy. They don't have to think about it. They just do it. Right. Definitely. Sadly, that will not get you anywhere near as far as if you, like you said, take the time to own it yourself and make a real plan. Okay, Rod, and we've done 2 myths.
Sweet.
So we're just rolling. Only 19 more to go. We should be done in a couple hours.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, we're probably not going to get through all these, but myth number 3 that we're hitting on, Rod. This is your turn. What are you going with?
I'm going to throw the dart just by saying, okay, I'm going to jump to number 18. I haven't looked and see what it is, but now.
Okay. I like it. So and 18
says all debt.
We've hit this. We've hit this one.
We have.
But it's been 140 episodes. So Rod, the question is the myth is, okay, first, is that a common myth? Is that a legitimate myth that you hear out there?
Okay, all debt is bad debt, I think, is a common myth because there is at least one voice. There are multiple voices out there that truly believe this, or at least truly advocate for this. And basically, here's where I think that comes from. There are people who are irresponsible with debt. And because there are people who are irresponsible with debt, these gurus, so again, we'll just call them out, Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, some of these gurus out there have taken the stance that no one should want any debt because it can be toxic.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think the myth comes from.
Because somebody did a bad job with debt, let's just take it out of everybody's hands. But the problem is the problem with that is that it takes the opportunity away from the people who are willing to do it the right way. Right. And so while it's eliminating the, downside possibility of getting swamped in debt, it's also, eliminating the upsides of being able to manage it properly and grow wealth in a more meaningful way. So it's it's a difficult one.
And the type of debt matters too. Although I'll give a caveat on that as well, because again, the gurus would say, you don't even need a credit card. What are you doing with a credit card in your wallet? Okay, and my answer is
ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. Why would I not have a credit card when there's a lot less risk to using a credit card than a debit card, as an example, right? If I'm comparing those directly across from each other. And number 2, the fact that I have a credit card doesn't mean I'm carrying a balance on that credit card.
It doesn't have to, Rod, but here's the deal. People can, and therefore you might, and therefore you shouldn't even mess with it.
That's where it comes from. And so I would agree if someone is not able to, just the idea that I still have a credit available on my card, therefore I have to use it. If that's your attitude, then do the responsible thing and get rid of the card. But I think for most people, at least most people that I know, are responsible and can, manage it. So
okay, here's what I'll say. Most our clients, the people we talk to in general, are responsible. It helps that most of them make money, right? It's a lot easier to be responsible with debt when you have money.
Sure.
It becomes really difficult to deal with debt when you just don't make money and you get into debt and there's no way to find your way back out of it.
Yeah.
But so and again, those are the stories that end up making this myth come about, right? They just, because it can happen, it could happen to you, therefore it is bad. Okay. I think that one's I think we've nailed that one. We don't need to hit on that one too much.
Good.
Okay. My turn, Rod. I'm excited. Okay. I'm going to go all the way down to number 21 and say this. Myth: all startups are high risk. Okay, that one's interesting. That's interesting. And I think it's interesting because I think we typically do think any startup is high risk, don't we? If you were, let's say as an investor, you were given just about any other investment versus somebody telling you that they're coming to you with a startup idea. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess that's kind of a silly statement, but like most of the typical stuff that we see out there you would feel like is less risky than this situation where it could be awesome. Even if you have a lot of faith and belief in the founders and the team, it could be really great, but it also just we just know it's really hard to get a business off the ground, or it can be. Yep. So here's the deal. I think all startups are high risk. I know that there's levels of risk, so I'm going to call this not a myth. I'm just going to call it truth. I think it's truth.
Okay, and
now you can fight me on this, but let me just give you my thoughts real quick, and then you can tell me what you think. I would say that there's different levels of risk, and there's even different levels within what you would qualify as high risk. But as it's relative and compared to most other investments, I would say that basically all startups are high risk.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel good about that. Tell me what you think.
Well, here's what I'm going to say, and you'll probably say, "Well, we're just saying the same thing." But here's my response to that. I think all startups are higher risk because if I had to choose between, again, same founders, same experience, whatever, same team, qualifications, who are in an existing running successful business for whatever, even just say 3 or 4 years in, compared to the exact same team, exact same qualifications in a startup, the startup is higher risk because yes, you're betting on the team, but you're also betting on the market being there and just even other risk, regulatory risk and other things that every business carries, but it's more substantially carried by the startup. So I would say higher risk.
Higher, you're just saying it's not definitively wouldn't be necessarily high risk. It just would be higher than a typical, something that's more common.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's fair. Here's a question, Rod. How risky is it to invest in how old's your youngest kid?
11.
They're maybe a little old for a lemonade stand, but let's go with it. Okay, so you're investing in the lemonade stand. How risky is that? Is that high risk? Okay, I thought about this. I was actually going to use it in an example and be like, that's not high risk. And then I was like, actually, it's very high risk. The chances of them succeeding in that lemonade stand are slim to none. At least based on my kids, they have not had any success. In fact, one summer, I ran over to Costco and I got Kate a bunch of candy bar, a whole setup, so she could just wheel and deal, and all they ended up doing was eating the candy. They ate
what I
all
was
of their
gonna say, too.
inventory.
That's
So
what I was
the
gonna say.
risk was extremely high. Now,
Yeah.
the good news is the amount at risk wasn't all that high, but the actual risk is pretty high. So that's a bad example. Okay, Rod, we're moving on to the next one. It's your turn.
Okay, I'm going to randomly say 9.
Number 9. Okay, let's see what we got. Number 9.
Number 9 says the stock market is the only way to grow wealth.
Okay, well, that's stupid. Okay, we need to change these. I'm going to change this one too. What if I say the stock market is the best way to grow? Because we know it's not the only way. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And maybe we don't even think it's about, but let's roll with that. The stock market is the best. I would say that is the more common myth. I think that most people realize that, like, real estate, as an example, exists, and they know that people can make money in it. So to say that stock market's the only way, too literal.
Too easy. Okay.
Too easy.
Yeah. So is it the best way to grow wealth? Is it the
best way to grow wealth in your opinion? I mean, okay, this is stupid. I already know your opinion is that it's not, but why?
Well, I'm going to say it depends on who you are, because there are people for whom, like, I know day traders, and they shouldn't. I mean, they do invest in other places as well, because, again, you should diversify. But if you're saying what's the best place for this person to be investing right now in any given day, it is in the stock market for those people. That's what they know. They've learned it. They figured it out.
So objective, Rod. I'm impressed.
Well, the problem is that it is subjective because it depends on who the person is, right?
That's true. I guess that's true. So what if a person is not willing to put in maybe the time and energy to learn
or
their space,
or they're entrepreneurial? You know what I mean? Like, so the skill set.
Okay, so they have so much going on in their business that the investment needs to be simple.
Yeah. So there could be, and the problem that I have with that, though, is in that case, they're not picking it because of its growth potential. They're picking it because of its ease of plugging in, whether they manage their own Vanguard account or whether they hand their money to an advisor and say, hey, go invest this for me and do the best you can.
Okay. So I'm going to say it is neither the only way to grow it or the best way, nor the best way, I should say. I would say even if you're that person, then stop being that person. Like, put a little effort into figuring, because that will be you'll be way better off. Just go learn it, figure it out. Like,
that's great.
There is a better way. So even if you're that person, if you're listening and you're like, you know what, I'm that person. I spend most of my time in my business. I really don't have time to figure out the investment side. Okay, we're not suggesting this has got to be like an hour a day. We're talking about, like, go spend a couple hours one time and then just kind of keep up on opportunities that exist out there. Yeah. And now all of a sudden you're in a place where you can have an opportunity to take advantage of the opportunities, right? But if you don't do that, well, you can't. And we know without question. Okay, so this is really funny. I've got a buddy that I spent, you know him. I'm not going to say names, but we just met with him. He gave us some advice on our deferred comp plan, right? Mm-hmm. And this guy's an advisor. He manages hundreds of millions of dollars in assets, and he was going through and showing us some of the opportunities in our deferred comp plan. And one of the things that I just found interesting, Rod, was that his favorite place to invest is none other than the alternative asset fund. Mm-hmm. And he is like truly I invest people's money in the market. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not using alternative assets for client money too.
Sure.
But I think he's pretty simple. He wants to be like, here's the principles that we use and they grow wealth, and it works. It's just like more like a slow and steady wins the race. But what was interesting is in his own money, he wanted to push it a little bit further, and he likes the alternative asset. My point is here just to say, I don't think that the stock market is the only place. I don't think it's the best place. I think it is a place, and that's it.
I like it.
Okay. Is it my turn or yours?
It is your turn.
Okay, Rod, we're going back up top all the way to number 3.
Okay.
Because everybody knows this is true. Real estate always increases in value. Is that a myth, Rod?
It is a myth.
Okay, well, okay, so I should say, is it a common myth? Like, is it? So I know when I say is it a myth, I don't mean like is it true?
People actually believe it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I would say on a couple things come to mind on that question.
Okay.
Over a long period of time, I think there are a lot of people who just would adhere to the idea that real estate always increases in value.
Okay.
Given 10 years,
right.
given 20 years. Okay.
I've heard it. I've heard the rhetoric that, in fact, as I'm saying it, as you said it, I was like, well, of course, I hear people say that all the time.
Yep.
It always increases. They're not necessarily saying over a 6-month period. They're just saying over a long period of time, it always increases in value.
Yep.
That's not true, by the way.
Yep.
But I get their point.
Okay. So then the next one's going to be even more painful for people. And that is the myth that has been, I think, busted recently for a lot of people. And that is real estate as a hard asset will always carry its value. And you don't have to worry about losing money in real estate over the long term.
Okay. Well, we certainly know that that's not true. And I'm not sure if we even want to how hard do you want to litigate this, Rod?
Well, here's just I'll make one point with it. And that is just because the asset itself, a hard asset, like that concept is true. If I own a hard asset, if I own the piece of property outright, values can fluctuate. I still have income. I'm good. And again, long term, I think I do adhere to the idea that in most cases, the values do go up over, whatever, especially 10, 20-year period of time. So I can withstand fluctuations along the way, and that's okay. Yeah. The challenge is leverage.
That's it.
If I'm over leveraged in my real estate, it's not a hard asset to me. It's a hard asset to my lender. Right? They can come and take that from me. And I can't say anything about it, right? All of a sudden it blew up. Right. I didn't.
So what you're saying then is the underlying asset didn't blow up. It's not like it suddenly went to even if it decreased in value, it doesn't mean that it just had no value anymore. It just potentially went down. And and then again, we've seen this. So this is obviously a touchy subject because we know people who have lost money inside of especially inside of syndication deals, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's one of those things where we always want to be careful and make sure people understand the importance of knowing the risk and reward that we're taking on when we're going into those. Here's the thing that's hard, man. I just feel like, and this is really hard to fight against. We get into these market cycles where things just work. Mm-hmm. And we kind of just figure they'll work because they have worked. Yeah. And so if I've been investing for 5, 6, 7 years and it just always has worked out for me, then my assumption is it's going to continue to work out. Mm-hmm. But I guess the moral of the story is to remember that even if it works out most of the time, and the reason that we're able to create the big, those larger returns that we're creating is because we're taking on the additional risk through, as you hit on, leverage, which is really what gets people in trouble most often, mm-hmm. right? Rarely, but here's the thing: leverage is also what pushes the return, and so it's like, okay, well, we're not just going to throw leverage out. You know what I mean?
Yep.
We just have to figure out how to manage it the best we can, and sometimes, if we're being honest, it might catch us by surprise, but again, I just maintain that I always say this: if you, on a personal level, can maintain your liquidity, mm-hmm. then you smooth out a lot of that. And of course, as on a business level, right? If I'm a real estate syndication, the same thing applies, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I can carry enough reserve, then I know I don't run into the issue. That can become difficult to do.
Yeah. And the other additional piece I would say is people, because of what you just said, they see success in a certain category. They feel like, hey, this is my best way to grow my money. I'm going to just keep dumping all my money into this. It's just another reminder to diversify. Because again, you're not happy about losing money. No one's ever happy about losing it. But it feels very, very different if all of my money was in that category as opposed to if I had it in a variety of different places and suffered in that one area because of that cycle.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, Rod, let's do 2 more.
Okay.
All right. Pick the best ones. I think it's your turn.
Okay. So I'm going to look at them this time.
Okay. Should I
scanning over
start
them.
playing like the Jeopardy music?
Okay, and some of these we've actually hit on certain angles of them. So I'm going to do this number 11.
Okay.
Investing in alternative assets is only for the wealthy. I had a funny experience with this. I'm going to tell you a story real quick first.
I love stories.
You know our buddy Chris Odegaard?
I do.
Okay. He wrote a book.
Prolific investor himself.
Yes.
A little shout out for Chris and his book. Oh boy, Rod, this isn't.
I have it on my shelf. I just can't find it really quickly. Anyway,
Okay.
but here's the story. He wrote the book. He sells it through Amazon, and one of his first reviews was from a former girlfriend who read his book and just had to blast him. But that was her thing. She says he's throwing all these ideas out there about alternative investing, but you can only do it if you're a millionaire. That was her whole.
Okay, wait.
Her criticism.
So he had a negative review on it.
He did. Yeah.
Dang it! I guess I'll go give him a positive. We got to balance these out.
So I happened to come in after that, and so I was able to try to address that concern for anyone in the future who's reading his reviews. But it was just funny to get a little bit of a laugh out of that, because very clearly, even in his examples that he used, he wasn't ever saying you had to have $1 million to invest in this, or you had even probably the way where that million mark came from is her implication was probably you have to be accredited to participate in any of these things that you're talking about. And certainly there were examples he gave, and there are examples in the alternative space. There are a lot of places where you have to be an accredited investor in order to play and invest in that specific investment, right? And someone might say the best investments, quote unquote, in the alternative space, you have to be accredited to participate. And there may be some credence to that. But that's not the only, those aren't not the only good, legitimate investments in the alternative space to invest in. So I think this is a myth, because alternative investing in alternative assets can be done for whoever you are. And especially when you include starting a business, having a side hustle, that kind of thing, as investing in the alternative space, kind of like investing in yourself. In that case, you don't need much money at all to get started.
I think that's totally fair. And I agree with that, because I always say the best place, like the number one place that I've seen people create wealth is through their ability to create income, revenue.
Yeah.
That's like the number one way. Like investing is powerful, but it's only powerful to the extent that I can actually save money above and beyond my living expenses, right?
Right.
So like, without question, if I can, from my experience, the people that I know that I've seen become the wealthiest almost always do it through their own ability to create income, whether that's their own business, whether that's a really specialized skill set that gives a higher income. Those are the kind of things that we see happen first. And so to your point, I think that's true. Now, there, like you said, it's based in truth, because historically there has been some truth to that. At least when you shrink the definition of alternative assets. So if you're saying, hey, not can I go, everyone knows I could go figure out how to save a little bit of money and do a real estate deal on my own, right?
Mhm.
Even if I'm not wealthy. Like I've heard of, 18-year-old kids that save up 10 grand and figure it out how to do it. So,
Yep.
so like that I think is absolute, from that standpoint, it's a complete myth. The part where I think it comes into play for people is they think they're comparing it to their mutual funds and things like that,
Mhm.
right? And so in that space, they're like, well, I don't have the same availability for dollar cost averaging inside of a real estate. And so for me, it's like less available unless I have $50,000 or $100,000. Can I go into this syndicate? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just kind of a different beast. But so it's almost like I do agree without question it's a myth. And yet I can understand like where people come from when they feel that way. But all they have to do is just get outside of that box and realize that the alternative asset space is so much broader than just do I have $50,000 that I can put with, ABC fund that invests in real estate.
Right.
Hey, Rod, I'm excited for the last one. We're going to do myth number 15. I think it's our 7th myth of 21. So we've still got lots of myths to go through. But not today. So myth number 15, Rod, you can ignore traditional asset classes once you invest in alternatives. What do you think?
I think there is definitely a classification of people for whom this is a myth. They start to believe this, that you have to choose one or the other. And if you've gone to the dark side, there's no coming back.
Okay, but this isn't even a you have to, Rod. This is a you can, right? You can ignore traditional assets once you've gone into. You don't have to, but you can. What do you think? Mm-hmm. So you're saying that there's definitely people who you've run across who are like, okay, I've seen these other opportunities in the alternative space. I think I'm totally comfortable walking away completely from traditional assets.
Yeah. So if that's kind of what you're saying, well, you can ignore traditional assets, then that's true. Like there are people out there who are living it right now.
I absolutely agree. I think you totally can. There's no reason why you can't. Now, that doesn't mean you necessarily want to or should, but can you? Man, I know a ton of real estate investors, especially these arrogant real estate investors who, hit it big for a little bit. They just are like, well, why would I give money any other place in the world when I can do everything myself, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, sometimes they can. Sometimes they can't. But the reality is that we've at least seen people go through utilizing completely alternative assets and do just great. I would say the more prudent approach would be to utilize the best of both worlds, depending on my situation. My favorite saying, Rod, situation is the boss. And it absolutely is. When it comes to traditional versus alternative assets, I have both because there's okay, I'll give you an example. And this is like an obvious hit you in the head one, but we'll use it. So we touched on, deferred comp plan as an example. Well,
sure.
Well, some of the companies that we work with, they'll have these little plans for us that they put money in. And so like in a situation where you're getting free money, like why wouldn't you invest in the place that they're giving you to invest? And if the place that they're giving you is primarily traditional, well, it would still be really silly not to take advantage of it, right?
Yep.
So anyway, that one's like an obvious one, but there's a lot more nuanced situations where you're going to find that it does make a lot of sense to go on the, and again, we hope that people see the light and understand that alternatives are a really incredible opportunity, but not so much so that they're just ignoring the opportunities that are in front of them. And I think that both places are places you can create good returns. In fact, Rod, I think I was looking in my deferred comp plan just the other day, and I was at like 22% over the last year. Now, it doesn't do 22% every year, right? But the point is it's in a traditional market-based portfolio, and it produced like really great returns. I would have felt good about that regardless of where I was getting those returns. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, I know I've kind of gone off on a tangent, but what do you think?
One thing that we've been really consistent with, I think, from the beginning is trying not to take an extreme stance on really anything, because there are people, especially in our space and in the alternative space, the life insurance space, that would say nobody has any need for any form of traditional retirement plan. If you're offered it, turn it down. If you have money there, get it out, right? And we clearly, again, because we participate in them, obviously, at some level, but we don't believe that that's a dangerous stance to ever take, to say nobody should ever or everybody should always, because, well, and I'll give you, I've used this example before, but I'll give you a really quick one. When you get to retirement, wouldn't it be great if all of your money came out of tax-free places?
It would be great.
You just never have to worry about paying taxes again. And that's the dream for people. And there are planners out there and systems out there that build you towards that. However, would you believe me if I told you there's actually something that could be more efficient than that?
I would believe you, Rod. I'd believe you.
What if, because here's the thing, because you can still do that, have everything come out tax-free, and have money in a pre-tax account. You put money in the 401k, Wild. You get to retirement age. If everything's coming out of tax-free place anyway, well, guess what? You have this standardized deduction of whatever, I don't know what it is right now, but as a couple, 20 grand or something, right? Of income that you could take out of a taxable place, and you don't pay the tax on that because it just fits within the standardized deduction.
Okay. Right? There's some like free strategy session from Rod. If you want to have a little bit of extra traditional brokerage money or IRA money, no problem. You've got some wiggle room in there.
Yep. And because you saved on that tax, that's more efficient than forcing everything into only, Roth, life insurance, tax-free distribution places.
Okay. Well, this has taken us down an interesting road, Rod. We're talking about how you can ignore traditional asset classes once you invest in alternatives. And I'm just going to finish by just, without question, saying that myth is busted. Do you agree?
Well, if you think,
oh crap,
unless you
Caveats.
go back and say it wasn't
so
actually
boring, Rod.
If you go back and say it wasn't actually a myth in the beginning.
Okay. All right. Well, this was fun though. So we went through 7 myths. If you think it's fun to go through myths, first of all, if you have any myths that you want us to bust, send it into Rod or Christian at moneyinsightsgroup.com. Let us know if you think it's fun and interesting. And if not, let us know that too, so that we can put out better stuff. But thanks everybody for hanging out with us today, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Money Insights Podcast. To learn more about the financial and business strategies discussed in this show, please visit moneyinsights.net. The views and opinions expressed on the Money Insights Podcast are not intended to be individual financial, tax, or legal advice. Always consult with the appropriate advisor before making financial decisions. And if you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This will help others find the show and learn wealth-building strategies for themselves. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.